Mom started giving my diabetic father blood thinners with clotting meds and doubled his diabetes pills while dating her business partner, Roberto, as a cardiac nurse. I knew these combinations would kill him within months. Then I discovered she'd hired a home health aide named Victoria, who had 2 previous elderly clients die under mysterious circumstances, and increased Dad's life insurance policy the month before. Dad was diagnosed with diabetes and heart disease 2 years ago, and ever since then, he's been taking a cocktail of medications that required careful monitoring. My mother, Helen, was this sharp-dressed realtor who spoke in her client voice even at breakfast, running our household like a CEO managing a Fortune 500 company. She'd been married to Dad for 30 years and never let anyone forget who was in charge. My siblings constantly asked me to check Dad's medications during our Sunday family dinners. His blood pressure pills looked wrong to my trained eye, and his diabetes meds seemed completely off schedule. I'd quietly adjust dosages when Mom wasn't looking, catch dangerous interactions before they happened, basically keep his heart ticking like a Swiss watch instead of a dollar store alarm clock. Then Roberto started showing up at family events. Mom introduced him as her business partner at Dad's 65th birthday party. This Italian guy, about 10 years younger with teeth so white they could guide ships to shore. She explained they were developing properties together, and Dad just smiled and shook his hand without asking questions. He even passed Roberto the good scotch, trusting as always. 3 weeks later, I noticed something disturbing about Dad's med organizer. The whole thing looked like someone had played pharmaceutical Jenga with his medications. Blood thinners sat right next to clotting meds, and his diabetes pills were doubled up in dangerous combinations. I tried to fix the mess, but Mom caught me red-handed in their kitchen. "You're a nurse, not his doctor," she said firmly. "I handle his medications now." I just nodded and went back to my apartment without fighting. No dramatic scene, no confrontation, just me learning to keep my medical opinions to myself when Mom clearly needed her space. By week 5, the symptoms became impossible to ignore. Dad complained about severe dizziness during Sunday dinner, and his hands shook so badly he couldn't carve the roast. He nearly fainted just walking to his recliner, but Mom blamed it all on his age and stress from retirement. I bit my tongue so hard it should have needed stitches, watching him struggle while she dismissed every concern. My brother Kyle tried suggesting that maybe I should take a look at Dad's medications, but Mom shut him down faster than a bar at sunrise. "We have his doctor for that," she insisted, while texting someone under the table with unusual focus. The property viewings with Roberto increased to 3 nights a week, though when I checked county records out of curiosity, there were no new listings under her name. Month 2 brought darker developments that made my nurse instincts scream. Dad's confusion worsened to the point where he called me by my sister's name 3 times in one visit. His ankles swelled up like water balloons, showing classic signs of medication chaos that I wasn't allowed to address. Mom kept insisting his doctor was adjusting things, while she disappeared for her evening meetings. The crisis came in month 3 when Dad collapsed in the garage while trying to get the mail. Kyle called me in a panic because Mom was at another business meeting and wasn't answering her phone. The ambulance arrived within minutes, and I watched the EMT's faces go pale as they reviewed his medication list. One of them whispered to his partner about contraindications in a tone that made my stomach drop. At the hospital, Dr. Martinez pulled up Dad's chart and started shaking his head. The blood work showed medication levels scattered all over the map like a toddler's crayon drawing. Some levels were dangerously high while others barely registered. His kidney function was dropping fast, and his liver enzymes were screaming for help. "Who's been managing his medications?" Dr. Martinez asked the room. Mom walked in just then, with Roberto's cologne trailing behind her like a guilty conscience. "I have been managing everything. Is there a problem with my husband's care?" Dr. Martinez laid out the lab results with clinical precision, showing interaction warnings that would alarm any medical professional. He pointed out dosage errors that would make a first-year pharmacy student cringe, then asked the question I'd been dreading. "Why wasn't your cardiac nurse daughter consulted about any of this?" "I prefer to handle my husband's care myself," Mom said, clutching her designer purse like it held state secrets. That's when the social worker entered with her clipboard and carefully neutral expression. She said she had routine questions about home care, but her eyes stayed sharp as she watched Mom's reactions to each query. The questions covered support systems, medication management protocols, and any recent changes in household routines. Mom's answers got shakier than Dad's hands had been at dinner. When the social worker asked about life insurance, Mom actually stuttered before admitting, "Just increased it last month for estate planning purposes." The social worker stopped dead in her tracks. The social worker's pen hovered over her clipboard, while Mom's face went through more color changes than a traffic light. Roberto appeared in the doorway then, his cologne announcing him before his perfectly styled hair came into view. He placed a hand on Mom's shoulder, and she leaned into it like they'd practiced this move 1,000 times. Dr. Martinez cleared his throat and continued reviewing the medication errors. Each one he listed made my nursing instincts flare harder. The beta blockers mixed with calcium channel blockers, the doubled diabetes medication that could send Dad into hypoglycemic shock, the blood thinners at doses that turned minor cuts into medical emergencies. I watched Dad lying there, tubes and wires turning him into a human circuit board, while Mom acted like this was all some terrible misunderstanding. The social worker excused herself to make some calls, and that's when Mom turned on me. Her realtor smile stayed plastered on, but her eyes went cold as January steel. She suggested I should focus on my own life instead of interfering with theirs, while Roberto nodded along like a dashboard bobblehead. Kyle shifted uncomfortably in his chair, caught between family loyalty and growing suspicion. I spent the next 3 hours at Dad's bedside, watching his vitals stabilize as the proper medications finally did their job. The nurses kept shooting me sympathetic looks, recognizing one of their own in a family crisis. Mom and Roberto disappeared for long stretches, returning with coffee that neither of them drank and whispered conversations that stopped whenever anyone got close. Dr. Martinez returned with a treatment plan that basically meant starting from scratch with Dad's medications. He emphasized the importance of proper supervision and suggested having a medical professional oversee the transition. Mom's jaw tightened at that, but she agreed with the same enthusiasm someone shows for a root canal. The social worker came back with forms about home health services, which Mom signed while making it clear she considered this a temporary inconvenience. The drive home felt like navigating a minefield. Kyle followed me to my apartment, where we sat in my kitchen trying to process what we'd witnessed. He admitted noticing Mom's evening absences, but assumed she was just stressed about Dad's health. Neither of us wanted to voice what we were really thinking, that our mother might be deliberately harming our father, so we danced around it like it was radioactive. I pulled up Dad's medication list on my laptop and started cross-referencing interactions. The combinations weren't just careless, they were systematically dangerous. Each error compounded the others, creating a pharmaceutical perfect storm that would slowly destroy his organs while looking like natural decline. My hands shook as I documented everything, creating a timeline that painted an ugly picture. The next morning brought a family meeting at my parents' house. Mom had arranged Dad's medications on the kitchen table like evidence in a trial, explaining how overwhelmed she'd been trying to manage everything alone. Roberto sat beside her, rubbing her back while she performed grief that would win acting awards. Dad was still in the hospital, too weak to witness this performance, which was probably for the best. My sister arrived late, having driven in from her job 3 hours away. She took one look at the medication display and immediately sided with Mom, talking about how hard it must be to handle such complex medical needs. I bit my tongue until it hurt, watching Mom accept comfort for a crisis she'd created. Kyle kept shooting me looks that said he was starting to see the pattern too. Mom announced she'd hired a home health aide to help with Dad's care once he was discharged. The aide would handle all medications under Mom's supervision, ensuring no more mix-ups occurred. She delivered this news like she was doing us all a favor, the devoted wife making sacrifices for her husband's well-being. Roberto mentioned he'd be helping more too, since his schedule was flexible. I excused myself to check on Dad at the hospital, needing distance from Mom's performance. The ICU was quiet, except for the mechanical breathing of machines keeping people alive. Dad was awake but groggy, asking about Mom in a voice that broke my heart. He worried about her stress levels, about how hard this must be for her, completely unaware of the danger sleeping in his bed every night. The head nurse pulled me aside to discuss Dad's case. She'd seen the medication list and had questions that danced around accusations without quite making them. We both knew what those combinations meant, what kind of knowledge it took to create such specific interactions. She handed me pamphlets about elder abuse resources, her eyes saying what her professional boundaries wouldn't let her voice. Back at the house, I found Mom and Dad's study going through papers. Roberto's cologne getting its own character introduction is something else. Apparently it arrives at crime scenes before he does and leaves a trail like breadcrumbs, which is surprisingly helpful for tracking suspicious business meetings that don't actually involve any real estate. Insurance documents spread across his desk like tarot cards predicting a dark future. She explained she was organizing things for the home health aide, making sure all the medical information was easily accessible. Roberto helped her file papers, their movements synchronized like they'd done this before. Kyle cornered me in the garage later, finally ready to voice his suspicions. He'd noticed Mom's late-night phone calls, the way she and Roberto touched when they thought no one was looking, the property meetings that never produced any sales. We stood among Dad's tools, these symbols of his capable hands now too shaky to use them, and faced the possibility that our mother was trying to call him. The week passed in a blur of hospital visits and family tensions. Dad improved steadily once his medications were properly managed, his confusion clearing like fog burning off in sunlight. Mom played the devoted wife during visiting hours, holding his hand and promising to take better care of him. Roberto usually appeared right after she left, checking on her emotional state with suspicious timing. I started documenting everything in a journal, creating a paper trail of observations and concerns. The patterns became clearer with each entry. Mom's mistakes with medications coincided with Roberto's increased presence. The insurance policy changes happened right after their business partnership began. The property meetings intensified as Dad's health declined. It was like watching someone assemble a jigsaw puzzle of premeditated harm. The home health aide Mom hired turned out to be a woman named Victoria, who arrived with credentials that looked legitimate, but something about her felt off. She moved through our parents' house with practiced efficiency, organizing Dad's medications into color-coded containers while Mom supervised every movement. I watched from the kitchen doorway as Victoria nodded at Mom's instructions, her hands moving with precision that suggested medical training beyond basic aide certification. Dad came home after 5 days in the hospital, still weak but alert enough to recognize everyone. The discharge paperwork emphasized strict medication monitoring, and Dr. Martinez had personally written notes about avoiding specific substance interactions. I photocopied everything before Mom could file it away, building my own medical record that might matter later. Victoria started her shifts the next morning, arriving at 7 sharp with a medical bag that seemed unnecessarily large for basic home care. She checked Dad's vitals with equipment more advanced than most aides carried, recording numbers in a leather-bound journal instead of standard forms. Mom hovered nearby, explaining Dad's routines with details that included when I usually visited and which neighbors might stop by. Kyle began dropping by more frequently, using his lunch breaks to check on Dad. He brought takeout containers as excuses, claiming he ordered too much food, but I recognized the worry behind his casual visits. During one afternoon visit, he pulled me into the backyard where Mom couldn't overhear, showing me text messages he'd screenshot between Mom and Roberto discussing timeline adjustments and necessary accelerations. The first incident with Victoria happened on her 4th day. I arrived for my regular visit to find Dad experiencing severe stomach cramps, doubled over in his recliner while Victoria calmly administered what she called antacids. My nursing instincts kicked in immediately. The symptoms didn't match simple indigestion. I checked the medication log Victoria maintained and noticed she'd given Dad his blood pressure medication twice within 3 hours. When I pointed out the error, Victoria's expression never changed. She simply noted my concern in her journal and adjusted the afternoon doses accordingly. Mom appeared from her home office, asking if there was a problem with Victoria's care. The way they exchanged glances suggested prior conversations about handling my interference. I started visiting at irregular times, hoping to catch medication errors in progress. One evening, I arrived to find Roberto in the kitchen preparing what he called a special Italian soup for Dad. He stirred the pot with careful attention while Mom set the table with her good china. The domestic scene felt rehearsed, like they were playing house with my father's life as backdrop. Dad ate the soup eagerly, complimenting Roberto's cooking skills between spoonfuls. I watched every bite, noting how Roberto encouraged seconds and thirds, insisting Dad needed strength for recovery. Later that night, Kyle called to report Dad had experienced severe nausea and dizziness, symptoms that aligned suspiciously with interactions between his medications and certain herbs common in Italian cooking. The pattern became clearer over the following weeks. Victoria's mistakes happened just frequently enough to keep Dad weak but not hospitalized. She'd document correct dosages while administering different amounts, her journal showing perfect compliance while reality told another story. I photographed her log pages during bathroom breaks, comparing them to Dad's actual symptom patterns. Mom's evening absences increased, always with Roberto, always for property business that produced no visible results. She'd return with shopping bags from high-end stores, modeling new outfits for Dad, who smiled weakly from his chair. He'd compliment her appearance while struggling to focus his eyes, the medication fog making him agreeable to everything. I confronted Victoria privately one afternoon, using my medical knowledge to detail exactly what her dosing errors were causing. She listened with polite attention, then suggested perhaps I was too emotionally involved to assess the situation objectively. Her calm professionalism never cracked, even when I described the specific organ damage occurring from the medication combinations. Kyle discovered Mom had been moving money from their joint accounts into separate holdings, small transfers at first, then larger amounts as Dad's condition worsened. He showed me bank statements he'd printed after Dad gave him temporary access to handle some bills. The pattern suggested systematic financial repositioning rather than normal household management. During Sunday dinner, our sister finally began noticing oddities. Dad couldn't remember her daughter's name, calling her by names from decades past. His hands shook so badly that Mom had to cut his meat, performing the caring wife routine while Roberto watched from his now regular seat at our family table. My sister pulled me aside afterward, admitting something felt wrong but unable to articulate what. I decided to track Victoria's movements outside work hours. Her car appeared at expensive restaurants where Mom and Roberto dined, parked just close enough to suggest surveillance or meetings. She lived in an apartment complex far above typical aide salary ranges, driving a car too new for someone in her supposed tax bracket. The breakthrough came when I found Victoria's previous employment records through a nursing colleague who worked at her former agency. She'd left under suspicious circumstances after 2 elderly clients died within months of her starting care. Both deaths were ruled natural, but the timing raised questions no one had pursued. The families had been too grief-stricken to investigate further. Armed with this information, I tried reasoning with Mom privately. I laid out the evidence carefully, showing how how the medication errors followed patterns too consistent for accidents. Mom listened with her realtor face, nodding at appropriate moments while her eyes calculated distances to exits. She thanked me for my concern, but insisted I was creating drama where none existed. Roberto's integration into our family accelerated after that conversation. He attended Dad's doctor appointments, sitting beside Mom while she described Dad's symptoms in ways that minimized their severity. He brought gifts for Dad, books he was too confused to read, music he was too tired to enjoy. Each present came with stories about his own father, creating false parallels that made Dad trust him more. I contacted Dr. Martinez directly, expressing concerns about Dad's home care. He reviewed his notes from the hospital stay, acknowledging the medication combinations had been dangerous. However, without concrete evidence of intentional harm, he could only recommend closer monitoring. He suggested I document everything meticulously, his tone implying he suspected more than he could officially state. Victoria's mistakes escalated subtly. She'd crush pills that should remain whole, affecting absorption rates. She'd give medications with foods that interfered with effectiveness, always with plausible explanations about Dad's difficulty swallowing or dietary preferences. Each error individually seemed minor, but collectively they maintained Dad's deterioration, while avoiding acute crises that would demand intervention. Kyle and I established a covert monitoring system. We'd visit separately, comparing notes afterward about Dad's condition, Victoria's activities, and Mom's behavior. We documented medication discrepancies, photographed Victoria's logs, and tracked Dad's symptoms in our own journals. The evidence mounted but remained circumstantial, nothing that would force action from authorities. Mom announced plans to renovate the house, making it more accessible for Dad's needs. Roberto presented architectural drawings that included converting Dad's study into a ground floor bedroom, changes that would isolate him from main living areas. The renovation would require Dad to temporarily relocate, though Mom remained vague about where he'd stay during construction. I researched the contractor Mom hired, discovering connections to Roberto's other business ventures. The renovation timeline stretched months longer than necessary, with costs that seemed designed to drain specific accounts. Victoria's past with those two elderly clients dying is absolutely fucking chilling, dude. The way she stays so calm while making these mistakes with Dad's medications is so goddamn terrifying. Every detail suggested long-term planning rather than spontaneous home improvement. Our sister began helping more, finally seeing through Mom's performance. She noticed how Roberto touched Mom's hand during conversations, how they shared looks that belonged to lovers, not business partners. She started visiting during Mom's absences, finding Dad alone with Victoria, who always had explanations for why Mom had to leave urgently. The medication situation reached critical levels when Dad developed irregular heartbeats that Victoria dismissed as anxiety. I recognized the pattern immediately. His blood thinners and heart medications were dangerously imbalanced. This time, I didn't confront Victoria. Instead, I began switching medications when she wasn't looking, replacing dangerous doses with safer alternatives I brought from home. Victoria noticed the improvements in Dad's condition, her journal entries showing confusion about his unexpected stability. She increased certain doses to compensate, but I continued my secret interventions. It became a pharmaceutical chess game, each of us maneuvering around the other while maintaining surface civility. Mom's frustration showed in subtle ways. She snapped at Roberto during a family dinner, upset about some timeline they'd discussed. She questioned Victoria more aggressively about Dad's improving symptoms, demanding explanations for why he seemed more alert. The careful facade cracked just enough to reveal the calculation underneath. I expanded my documentation to include recordings. State law allowed single-party consent, so I captured conversations where Mom discussed Dad's care with Roberto and Victoria. The recordings revealed coded language about progress and schedules that clearly meant something beyond medical care. Kyle discovered Mom had researched facilities for memory care patients, bookmarking places known for minimal family oversight. The browser history showed virtual tours of locations far from our area, places where visits would be difficult and monitoring impossible. She'd even filled out preliminary applications, waiting only for a doctor's recommendation about Dad's cognitive decline. The crisis point approached when Victoria announced she needed a week off for family matters. Mom scrambled to find replacement care, eventually settling on an agency aide who lacked Victoria's specific skills. During that week, Dad improved dramatically. His confusion lifted, his appetite returned, and his hand steadied enough to sign his own name again. Mom noticed the improvement immediately. She called Victoria repeatedly, their conversations growing heated enough to be heard through closed doors. Roberto appeared more frequently, having hushed discussions with Mom about adjusting strategies and alternative approaches. Their panic was palpable, but carefully controlled. I used Dad's temporary clarity to have important conversations. Without alerting Mom, I helped him review financial documents, noting changes he hadn't authorized. He was shocked to discover the insurance increases, the account transfers, and the renovation plans that would effectively imprison him. His trust in Mom cracked but didn't shatter. 40 years of marriage creating cognitive dissonance he couldn't fully process. Victoria returned early from her supposed family emergency, resuming care with renewed determination. Her medication errors became bolder, less concerned with subtlety. She started adding supplements to Dad's regimen, natural products that wouldn't require prescriptions, but could interact dangerously with his medications. I researched every supplement, finding connections to symptoms Dad developed within days of taking them. The combinations were clever, nothing immediately fatal, but designed to cause gradual organ failure that would appear natural for someone with his conditions. I documented everything, building a medical case that showed clear patterns of harm. Mom and Roberto's relationship became harder to hide. Neighbors mentioned seeing Roberto's car in the driveway at unusual hours. The mailman commented on packages addressed to Roberto at our parents' address. These small revelations created gossip Mom couldn't control, threatening the image she'd cultivated for decades. Kyle and I decided to involve our sister fully, sharing our documentation and suspicions. She initially resisted believing Mom capable of such calculated harm, but the evidence was overwhelming. We formed an alliance, taking shifts to ensure someone was always monitoring Dad's care. Our presence frustrated Mom's plans, creating tension that filled the house like smoke. The home health agency called one day, asking to verify Victoria's employment. They'd received complaints from another family about missing medications and wanted to confirm she still worked for us. Mom intercepted the call, vouching for Victoria enthusiastically while shooting me warning looks. The agency seemed satisfied, but I noted their number for future reference. Dad's birthday approached, and Mom planned an elaborate party that felt more like a farewell gathering. She invited distant relatives who hadn't seen Dad in years, creating guest lists that suggested last opportunities. Roberto helped with arrangements, his involvement now so normalized that relatives assumed he was a family friend rather than Mom's secret partner. I prepared for the party by pre-checking all of Dad's medications, ensuring Victoria couldn't use the chaos to administer dangerous doses. I enlisted Kyle to watch the food preparation, making sure nothing was added to Dad's special meals. Our vigilance was exhausting but necessary, each of us understanding the stakes. During the party, Mom performed her devoted wife role flawlessly. She guided confused relatives through conversations with Dad, covering for his memory lapses with practiced ease. Roberto circulated like a host, refilling drinks and sharing stories about Dad that he'd clearly learned from Mom. The whole event felt like a dress rehearsal for a funeral. Dad tired quickly, and Victoria suggested he rest in his room. I followed, watching her prepare his evening medications with unusual care. care. She noticed my presence but continued working, her movements precise and deliberate. The doses she prepared were exactly what could trigger a cardiac event in someone with Dad's conditions. I intervened directly this time, physically blocking Victoria from administering the medications. She remained calm, documenting my interference in her journal while Mom appeared in the doorway. The confrontation was quiet but intense, Mom insisting I was endangering Dad by disrupting his care routine. I held my ground, knowing the cost of backing down. The party continued below while we faced off in Dad's room. Mom's mask finally slipped completely, her voice dropping the perpetual sales pitch for something harder and more honest. She accused me of jealousy, of resenting her happiness with Roberto, of wanting to control Dad myself. The accusations were projection, but they revealed her true motivations. Victoria excused herself professionally, leaving the family drama to unfold. I heard her making phone calls in the hallway, possibly to the agency or to contacts who might offer similar employment. Her calm suggested this wasn't her first family confrontation, just another day in a very specific type of career. Mom and I reached an impasse that night. She knew I was actively sabotaging her plans, and I knew she was trying to call Dad. Neither of us could prove our cases definitively, creating a standoff that left Dad vulnerable in the middle. We agreed to a temporary truce, both sides regrouping for whatever came next. The weeks following the party were tense with careful maneuvering. Mom reduced Victoria's hours, claiming financial constraints while really limiting my opportunities to interfere. She started handling more of Dad's care personally, making it harder for me to switch medications or monitor doses. Roberto was present constantly, his role shifting from visitor to enforcer. I responded by teaching Dad to recognize his medications, showing him pictures of correct pills and doses. His cognitive function fluctuated, but on good days he could identify discrepancies. This small empowerment frustrated Mom's plans, forcing her to be more careful about obvious substitutions. Kyle discovered Mom had consulted with estate lawyers about power of attorney changes. The documents would give her complete control over Dad's medical decisions, eliminating any input from his children. She hadn't filed them yet, but their existence showed her next moves. We had to act before she gained legal authority to exclude us entirely. Our sister suggested a family intervention, confronting Mom directly with all our evidence. I worried this would push Mom to accelerate her timeline, but we were running out of options. Dad's body couldn't handle much more pharmaceutical assault, and every day brought new risks. We planned carefully, choosing a time when Roberto would be away and Victoria off duty. The intervention never happened as planned. Instead, Dad collapsed again, this time in the bedroom where no one could immediately help. By the time Mom discovered him, he was barely breathing. The ambulance ride felt like deja vu, but this time I rode along, refusing to leave his side. Mom followed in her car with Roberto, their arrival at the hospital together finally too obvious to ignore. Dr. Martinez met us in the emergency room, his expression grave as he reviewed Dad's condition. The blood work showed toxic levels of multiple medications, combinations that couldn't be accidental. He ordered immediate dialysis to clear Dad's system, working against time to prevent permanent organ damage. This time, he asked pointed questions about home care that Mom couldn't deflect. Dr. Martinez ordered security to keep Mom and Roberto in the waiting area while he stabilized Dad. Dr. Martinez basically turned into a medical detective superhero here, ordering security to keep Mom and Roberto in timeout while he saves Dad is the kind of power move that deserves its own theme music. The dialysis machine worked overtime clearing toxins from his bloodstream, and I watched the monitors track his vitals back toward normal ranges. The ICU nurses recognized me from previous visits, their expressions showing they understood this wasn't a simple medication error. Kyle arrived within 20 minutes, having left work the moment I texted him. Our sister drove straight from her office, making the 3-hour trip in just over 2. We gathered around Dad's bed while machines beeped their mechanical reassurances, each of us processing how close we'd come to losing him permanently. The hospital's patient advocate appeared with documentation about medical power of attorney. She explained that given the circumstances, they needed clarity on who could make decisions for Dad while he was incapacitated. Mom tried entering the room then, but security politely redirected her to the waiting area. Her protests echoed down the hallway, mixing with Roberto's attempts to calm her. Dr. Martinez pulled us aside to discuss next steps. He showed us lab results indicating chronic medication poisoning, patterns that suggested deliberate administration rather than accidental OD. The hospital had protocols for suspected elder abuse, and he'd already initiated them. Adult Protective Services would investigate, but we needed immediate plans for Dad's safety upon discharge. I contacted 3 different home health agencies that afternoon, specifically requesting their most experienced nurses. Each agency underwent my interrogation about background checks, medication protocols, and supervision standards. Kyle researched medical alert systems while our sister called Dad's insurance to understand coverage options. We worked like a crisis response team, each handling our area of expertise. Mom attempted entering through different hospital entrances throughout the day. Security had her photo at every checkpoint, turning her away with professional courtesy. Roberto waited in his car outside, visible through the lobby windows like a circling predator. Their persistence confirmed what we already suspected about their timeline and desperation. Dad regained consciousness that evening, confused but coherent. He asked for Mom immediately, 40 years of marriage creating automatic responses. We explained she was handling things at home, a half-truth that bought us time. He accepted this easily, the medication fog still affecting his judgment. I held his hand while Kyle adjusted his blankets, both of us avoiding the harder conversations ahead. The social worker from Adult Protective Services arrived the next morning. She interviewed each of us separately, taking detailed notes about Dad's care history. I provided my documentation, including medication logs, photos of Victoria's journal entries, and the timeline I'd constructed. She examined everything with professional detachment, asking follow-up questions that suggested she'd seen similar cases. Kyle presented the financial records he'd gathered, showing the systematic draining of joint accounts. The insurance policy changes raised particular interest, especially the timing relative to Dad's health decline. Our sister contributed her observations about Mom and Roberto's relationship, details that painted a clear picture of motive. The social worker thanked us for our thoroughness, promising a full investigation. Hospital administration got involved when Mom tried using her medical power of attorney to access Dad's room. The document was legally valid, but given the circumstances, they required judicial review before honoring it. This triggered an emergency hearing scheduled for the following day, forcing us to find legal representation immediately. Our sister contacted a colleague who specialized in elder law, arranging a consultation within hours. The lawyer reviewed our evidence that afternoon, nodding grimly at each revelation. She'd handled similar cases, though rarely with such detailed documentation. We discussed options for emergency guardianship, a process that would temporarily strip Mom's decision-making authority. The paperwork required multiple medical opinions, which Dr. Martinez agreed to coordinate. Every signature moved us closer to protecting Dad. Victoria appeared at the hospital that evening, attempting to visit Dad as his home health aide. Security turned her away per our instructions, but not before I noticed her making phone calls in the parking lot. Her presence suggested Mom was mobilizing resources, possibly preparing for the legal battle ahead. Kyle followed her at a distance, noting her license plate for our lawyer. Dad's condition improved steadily with proper medical care. His confusion lifted like a veil, revealing the sharp mind we'd always known. During a lucid moment, he asked about the security outside his room. I explained there were safety concerns, keeping details vague to avoid overwhelming him. He studied my face carefully, 40 years of reading his daughter's expressions telling him more than my words. The emergency hearing convened in a small courtroom within the hospital's administrative wing. Mom arrived with her own lawyer, Roberto conspicuously absent, but his influence evident in her designer suit and confident posture. She portrayed herself as a devoted wife overwhelmed by her husband's complex care needs, suggesting her children were overreacting to innocent mistakes. Our lawyer presented the evidence methodically. The medication logs showed patterns too consistent for error. The financial records revealed systematic asset transfer. The insurance changes coincided perfectly with Dad's health decline. Each piece built upon the last, creating an undeniable narrative. Mom's lawyer tried deflecting, but facts are stubborn things. The judge granted temporary emergency guardianship to us as a sibling group. Mom's medical power of attorney was suspended pending full investigation. She left the courtroom with her realtor smile intact but her hands shaking. Roberto waited in the hallway, their brief interaction suggesting contingency plans already in motion. We'd won this battle, but the war clearly wasn't over. We hired 2 nurses from different agencies to provide round-the-clock care. Each nurse received detailed briefings about Dad's medication history and the recent attempts at harm. They implemented a 2-person verification system for all medications, documenting everything with pharmaceutical precision. Kyle installed cameras in Dad's hospital room, creating visual records of everyone who entered. Dad noticed the increased security but didn't comment directly. He asked about Mom occasionally, accepting our explanations that she was handling insurance matters. The lies felt necessary but wrong, each one adding weight to our collective guilt. We took turns staying with him, ensuring he was never alone with anyone we hadn't personally vetted. Adult Protective Services expanded their investigation to include Victoria's employment history. They discovered patterns at previous jobs that suggested a specific type of elder care crime. 2 other families came forward with similar experiences, their loved ones having died under suspicious circumstances. The investigator mentioned potential criminal charges, though prosecution would require more concrete evidence. Mom attempted one final visit, arriving with flowers and a tearful performance about being kept from her husband. Security remained unmoved, following the court order precisely. She left the flowers at the nurse's station with a note professing her love and confusion about her children's actions. The handwriting looked shaky, but the message was clearly crafted for legal documentation. We found a rehabilitation facility specializing in medication recovery. The intake coordinator understood our situation immediately, implementing additional security protocols. They assigned Dad to a room near the nurse's station with limited visitor access. The facility's medical director personally reviewed his medication plan, creating safeguards against any external interference. The transfer happened quietly on a Thursday morning. Dad seemed relieved to leave the hospital, though confused about not going home. We explained he needed specialized care to fully recover, another half-truth that protected him from harder realities. He accepted this with the trust that had nearly culled him, believing his children had his best interests at heart. Kyle discovered Mom had listed the house for sale through Roberto's real estate connections. The listing appeared briefly online before our lawyer filed an injunction. The attempted sale violated the court's asset freeze, adding another piece to the growing legal case. Mom's desperation was showing through cracks in her carefully maintained facade. The rehabilitation facility's structure helped Dad immensely. Regular medication schedules, proper nutrition, and physical therapy restored strength we'd watched drain away for months. His cognitive function improved dramatically once the toxic combinations cleared his system. Within 2 weeks, he was walking independently and engaging in conversations about current events. Our sister coordinated with Dad's doctors to document his recovery. Each improvement was measured and recorded, creating medical evidence of how proper care reversed the previous decline. The contrast with his condition under Mom's supervision became undeniable. These records would prove crucial for any permanent guardianship proceedings. Roberto's presence in Mom's life became more public after the court orders. Neighbors reported seeing him at the house daily, sometimes overnight. The pretense of business partnership evaporated, replaced by open displays of affection. This relationship clarity actually helped our case, establishing motive for the financial manipulation and attempted murder. We arranged for Dad to meet with a therapist who specialized in family trauma. 2 weeks and he's already walking on his own and talking about current events. The medical team there really knows their stuff. The sessions happened slowly, carefully unpacking 40 years of marriage without destroying Dad's entire worldview. He began acknowledging discrepancies he'd previously dismissed, patterns of control he'd accepted as normal. The process was painful but necessary for his emotional recovery. The permanent guardianship hearing required extensive testimony. Dr. Martinez detailed the medical evidence of systematic poisoning. The Adult Protective Services investigator presented their findings about Victoria's employment patterns. Our lawyer connected every piece into a comprehensive narrative of attempted murder for financial gain. Mom's defense crumbled under the weight of evidence. The judge's ruling stripped Mom of all decision-making authority over Dad. The financial forensics revealed enough asset manipulation to trigger separate civil proceedings. Criminal charges remained possible pending further investigation. Mom left the courthouse in Roberto's car, their shared future now tied to the consequences of their choices. We moved Dad to a senior living community with graduated care options. He had his own apartment but access to medical support when needed. The staff understood his history, implementing protocols to prevent unauthorized visitors. He decorated the space with photos from happier times, creating new memories while preserving the good ones from his past. Kyle managed Dad's finances through the court-appointed structure, slowly recovering assets Mom had transferred. Some money was gone forever, but enough remained to ensure Dad's comfortable care. We established a family trust that required multiple signatures for any significant decisions, protecting against future exploitation. Our sister helped Dad reconnect with old friends Mom had isolated him from. These relationships, dormant but not dead, provided emotional support outside our immediate family. He joined the community's walking group, played cards on Wednesday nights, and even started attending the monthly dances. Life, interrupted but not ended, resumed its rhythm. The investigation into Victoria continued producing disturbing revelations. 3 more families identified her as their loved one's caregiver before suspicious deaths. The pattern was clear, but proving criminal intent remained challenging. She disappeared after the hospital confrontation, likely moving to another state to continue her deadly trade. We shared our documentation with every relevant authority, hoping to prevent future victims. Mom's attempts at contact came through lawyers initially, then through flying monkeys, distant relatives she'd convinced of her victimhood. We maintained the no-contact order, protecting Dad from manipulation attempts. Roberto's influence was evident in these communications, his business experience guiding her strategic approaches. Each attempt was documented and filed, building a harassment case if needed. 6 months after the crisis, Dad's health had stabilized completely. His medications, properly managed, controlled his conditions without the dangerous interactions. He'd gained weight, his hands steady enough for woodworking again. The man we'd almost lost was returning, piece by piece, medication by medication. The financial recovery continued slowly. The house sale was reversed, though Mom's name remained on the deed pending divorce proceedings Dad finally initiated. He'd reached acceptance about the marriage's end, understanding that love shouldn't require surviving attempted murder. The papers were filed quietly, 40 years ending with signatures instead of gravestones. We established a rotation for visiting Dad, ensuring consistent family presence without overwhelming him. Sunday dinners resumed at his new apartment. apartment, smaller but safer gatherings. He cooked again, simple meals that tasted like victory. Roberto's name was never mentioned. Mom's absence explained simply as, she lives elsewhere now. The criminal investigation eventually stalled without sufficient evidence for prosecution. The pattern was clear, but proving intent beyond reasonable doubt remained elusive. We accepted this outcome, focusing on Dad's safety rather than Mom's punishment. Justice sometimes comes through prevention rather than prosecution, protection rather than imprisonment. Dad's recovery inspired him to volunteer with elder advocacy groups. He shared his story carefully, without naming names but with enough detail to help others recognize similar patterns. His presentations at senior centers raised awareness about medication abuse and financial exploitation. From victim to advocate, he transformed trauma into purpose. The divorce finalized quietly, assets divided according to the court's supervision. Mom received her legal share but nothing more. Roberto's influence unable to manipulate judicial oversight. She moved to another state with him, their real estate ventures continuing elsewhere. We maintained vigilance through legal channels, ensuring she couldn't access Dad's medical or financial information. Our family structure reformed around new dynamics. Trust, broken and rebuilt, took different shapes. We learned to balance protection with independence, safety with dignity. Dad understood our vigilance came from love, accepting the cameras and check-ins as necessary evils. The man who'd trusted too easily learned to accept help protecting himself. Kyle became Dad's primary financial advocate, managing investments and expenses with transparent documentation. Our sister coordinated medical care, ensuring consistent communication between providers. I handled medication management, my nursing expertise finally welcomed rather than dismissed. We functioned as a team, each contributing our strengths to Dad's continued well-being. The senior living community embraced Dad completely. He became the unofficial greeter, welcoming new residents with genuine warmth. His apartment became a gathering spot for coffee and conversation, life flowing through rooms that had almost become crime scenes. The vitality Mom had tried to steal returned multiplied, shared with others who needed connection. 1 year after the hospital crisis, we celebrated Dad's 67th birthday differently. No elaborate party masking sinister intentions, just family gathered around his dining table. He blew out candles on a cake he'd helped bake, wishes focused on continued health rather than mere survival. The photographs from that day showed genuine smiles, relief replacing the performed happiness of before. Dad occasionally asked about Mom, wondering if she was happy in her new life. We answered honestly that we didn't know, hadn't maintained contact for everyone's safety. He nodded, understanding the necessity while mourning the marriage he thought he had. 40 years of memories couldn't be erased, only recontextualized through the lens of attempted murder. The legal protections remained in place permanently. Court orders preventing Mom from accessing Dad's information, restraining orders keeping physical distance, financial structures requiring multiple approvals. These safeguards felt excessive during calm periods, but necessary given the history. We'd learned that love could mask deadly intentions, trust could enable destruction. Victoria's name appeared in news reports from another state, another elderly death under suspicious circumstances. The pattern continued, but proving connections remained impossible. We forwarded our documentation to those investigators, hoping accumulated evidence might eventually stop her. Some predators are caught, others just documented, warnings for future families. Dad's health stabilized into a new normal. His conditions required management but not crisis intervention. Proper medications at correct doses controlled what Mom had weaponized. He walked daily, cooked regularly, and engaged with life fully. The man we'd almost lost to pharmaceutical poisoning thrived with proper care, proving recovery was possible even from systematic attempted murder. Our family bonds strengthened through shared trauma. Kyle and I grew closer, our partnership in Dad's protection creating deeper connection. Our sister visited more frequently. Her initial skepticism transformed into fierce protectiveness. We'd faced our mother's betrayal together, emerging as a unified force for Dad's well-being. The family we thought we had was gone, but the one we built from its ashes was stronger. Dad's volunteer work expanded to include speaking at medical conferences about elder abuse. He partnered with Dr. Martinez to present their case study. Names changed, but patterns preserved. Healthcare providers learned to recognize medication weaponization, financial exploitation, and the subtle signs of systematic harm. His near death became education, saving others from similar fates. The senior living community support proved invaluable for Dad's emotional recovery. Other residents shared their own stories of family betrayal, creating understanding born from common experience. He found particular friendship with a woman whose son had stolen her retirement savings, their shared vulnerability creating deep connection. They walked together daily, trust rebuilt carefully with someone who understood its fragility. 2 years after the crisis, Dad achieved something remarkable. Peace with what happened. Not forgiveness for Mom, but acceptance of reality. He stopped asking about her, stopped wondering what he'd done wrong. The therapy helped him understand that victims don't cause their abuse, that trust isn't a character flaw. He learned to live with eyes open but heart still capable of love. We maintained our vigilance but relaxed the constant monitoring. Dad had internalized safety protocols, checking his medications carefully and questioning any changes. He kept his financial information secure, understood the importance of documentation. The man who trusted blindly learned discernment without becoming paranoid. Dad went from nearly getting poisoned to becoming the senior center's most popular guy with his own coffee club and dance moves. Protection became self-care rather than imposed restriction. The house finally sold through proper channels, proceeds divided according to the divorce decree. Dad used his portion to prepay senior living expenses, ensuring stable housing regardless of future health changes. He donated some to elder abuse prevention organizations, transforming personal trauma into public good. The home where he'd almost died funded life for others. Roberto and Mom's relationship reportedly ended when his business ventures failed. Without Dad's assets to exploit, their partnership dissolved. Mom attempted returning to our state, but found her reputation preceded her. Real estate licenses require character references, and her history made professional rehabilitation impossible. Consequences came slowly, but inevitably. Dad's 70th birthday arrived with quiet celebration. He'd survived not just age, but attempted murder, emerging stronger despite the scars. We gathered in his apartment, 3 children who'd saved their father by refusing to accept comfortable lies. The cake was simple, the gathering small, but the joy was real. Every birthday now was a victory, proof that love could triumph over greed. His medications remained properly managed through systems we'd established. 2-person verification for any changes, regular reviews with Dr. Martinez, and careful documentation of every dose. What had been weaponized became routine healthcare, boring in its safety. Dad took his pills without fear, trusting the protocols that protected him. The story spread through our extended family, creating divisions between those who believed evidence and those who chose Mom's version. We accepted these losses, understanding that some relationships require shared reality. Dad mourned cousins who sided with Mom but recognized that truth mattered more than false harmony. Our smaller family circle was built on honesty, even when it hurt. Dad's final years in the senior living community were marked by genuine contentment. He served on resident committees, organized social events, and mentored newer arrivals. His apartment became a haven for those struggling with family betrayals, offering understanding without judgment. The man who'd nearly died from misplaced trust became a beacon for others navigating similar storms. When Dad eventually passed at 74, it was from natural causes properly managed. His heart, damaged by Mom's pharmaceutical assault but not defeated, simply wore out after a full life. We gathered around his hospital bed as he slipped away peacefully, medications keeping him comfortable without hastening the end. The death Mom had tried to orchestrate came on Dad's terms, surrounded by children who'd fought for his right to live. The funeral was small but meaningful. Mom wasn't invited or informed, protection extending even beyond death. Those who attended knew Dad's whole story, honoring both his trusting nature and hard-won wisdom. Dr. Martinez spoke about resilience. Our lawyer about justice served through prevention. Each eulogy acknowledged the man who'd survived attempted murder to live fully for 7 more years. His estate, protected by structures we'd established, transferred smoothly to his designated beneficiaries. The elder abuse organizations received generous donations, his volunteer work continuing through financial support. We divided personal belongings carefully, each item carrying memories of recovery rather than crisis. The woodworking projects he'd completed during his final years became treasured reminders of hands that had steadied again. Mom never attempted contact after Dad's death, perhaps understanding that some bridges burn completely. Roberto had long since moved on to other targets. Their partnership dissolved when profit disappeared. Victoria presumably continued her deadly trade in other states, a ghost haunting vulnerable families. Justice remained imperfect but sufficient. Dad had lived, thrived, and died on his own terms. We siblings maintained the bonds forged through crisis. Monthly dinners replaced weekly vigils, checking on each other rather than Dad. The shared trauma had created unbreakable connection, understanding born from facing our mother's betrayal together. We'd learned that family meant protection, that love required action, that trust needed verification. Dad's legacy lived through the lives he'd touched during recovery. The senior center established a medication safety program in his name. The elder abuse organizations used his case study for training. Dr. Martinez continued presenting their story at conferences, teaching healthcare providers to recognize pharmaceutical weapons. Each presentation potentially saved lives, Dad's near death becoming others' salvation. The house where everything happened was sold to a young family who painted the walls bright colors and filled rooms with children's laughter. They knew nothing of medication logs hidden in kitchen drawers or insurance papers spread across desks like tarot cards. The garage where Dad had collapsed became a workshop for different hands, tools serving creation rather than symbolizing decline. Life continued, unmarked by history's shadows. We learned to live with complicated grief, mourning the mother we thought we had while protecting ourselves from the one who'd existed. The woman who tried to call Dad for money became a cautionary tale, discussed rarely but remembered always. Her absence from our lives was a gift we gave ourselves, protection extended indefinitely. Years later, sorting through old photographs, I found one from Dad's 65th birthday, the party where Roberto first appeared. Mom's smile looked genuine if you didn't know to look closer. Dad's trust shone clearly, the good scotch already poured for the man who'd helped orchestrate his death. The photograph became a reminder that evil often wears familiar faces, that protection sometimes means seeing what we'd rather ignore. Dad had lived 7 years after we'd intervened, years filled with friendship, purpose, and peace. He'd transformed from victim to advocate, from trusting to wisely cautious. The medications that should have culled him had instead become symbols of survival, each properly managed dose a small victory. He'd died surrounded by love rather than deception, his final breath drawn freely rather than stolen. The senior living community planted a tree in Dad's memory, a oak that would grow strong with deep roots. Residents gathered for the dedication, sharing stories of his kindness and wisdom. Several mentioned how he'd helped them recognize exploitation in their own families, his openness about betrayal saving them from similar fates. The tree stood as testament to survival, growth after near destruction. We siblings gathered annually on the anniversary of the hospital crisis, not to mourn, but to celebrate. Each year marked another revolution around the sun that Mom had tried to deny Dad. We'd toast with good scotch, the kind Dad had shared too freely, and remember that we'd chosen him over her. The choice had cost us a mother but saved a father, mathematics of love that balanced despite the pain. The legal protections remained in place even after Dad's death, preventing Mom from accessing any records or claiming widow's benefits. She lived with the consequences of her choices. Roberto long gone and Victoria disappeared into the ether of predatory caregivers. Their triangle of greed had collapsed when we'd refused to let Dad become another statistic, another elderly person dead from medication mismanagement. Dad's story became part of our family narrative, told carefully to the next generation. My nieces and nephews learned that trust required wisdom, that family meant protection, that love sometimes demanded difficult choices. They understood why they had one less grandparent, accepted the necessity of boundaries. The lessons were hard but valuable, preparing them for a world where betrayal could wear familiar faces. The final accounting was simple. Dad lived. Despite Mom's pharmaceutical assault, Roberto's enabling, and Victoria's expertise, he'd survived to die naturally. We'd recognized the danger, documented the evidence, and acted despite the cost. 3 children had stood between their father and death, choosing his life over family harmony. The choice had fractured us but saved him, a trade we'd make again without hesitation. In quiet moments, I sometimes wondered what Mom felt, if she ever regretted choosing money over marriage. But those wonderings were brief, overwhelmed by gratitude that we'd acted in time. Dad had deserved better than death by medication, better than betrayal by the person he'd trusted most. We'd given him that better ending, not perfect but real. He'd lived knowing his children loved him enough to fight for him, even against their own mother. The medication organizer that had started everything sat in my drawer, a reminder of vigilance rewarded. Each compartment that had held potential death now stood empty, threat neutralized by action. I kept it not as a trophy, but as a warning, that danger could hide in plain sight, that love could mask deadly intent, that protection required courage to see truth. Dad was gone but not stolen. He'd died in his own time, surrounded by those who'd proven their love through action. The years we'd gained by intervention were precious beyond measure, filled with recovery and growth. Mom had tried to write his ending prematurely, but we'd seized the pen and given him chapters she'd tried to deny. Those chapters were our victory, written in properly managed medications and carefully protected assets. The story ended not with justice fully served, but with life fully lived. Dad had survived attempted murder to become an advocate, a friend, a symbol of resilience. His death came peacefully, naturally, on terms no one else dictated. Between the crisis and the conclusion were years of recovery, purpose, and love. Years Mom had tried to steal, but we'd fought to preserve. That was enough. In a world where justice is imperfect and family can betray, we'd managed to save one good man from those who claimed to love him. Dad lived, truly lived, after we'd almost lost him. His legacy was in lives touched, awareness raised, and family bonds strengthened through trial. He died knowing he was loved, protected, and valued, not for his assets, but for himself. The rest was just life continuing, shaped by choices made in crisis, but not defined by them. We'd learned hard lessons about trust and verification, about love requiring action, about family being those who protect, rather than just those who share blood. Dad's survival had taught us that. His life after crisis proving that recovery was possible even from the deepest betrayals. Thanks for reading this story with me, even though it had more twists than a pretzel factory. Subscribe for more.